it was just so sudden and unaware, and it just came from nowhere. I felt these hands on my shoulders, and I'm thinking, okay, that's odd, and the Vice President of the United States is touching me. But, you know, nothing, I guess, too out of the ordinary. But then I felt him get closer. He leaned in and was like right behind me on my body. And he leans down, smells my hair, and then plants this big long kiss on the top of my head. And it just happened so suddenly, I really didn't even know how to respond. And in my brain, I just kept thinking, the Vice President of the United States is smelling me. The Vice President of the United States is touching me. He's kissing me. And I just don't know what to do. And I've just kind of felt frozen.
Do you think that the intentions of the Vice President at the time count for anything? If he, you know, did not have malicious or ill-considered intentions, that's essentially what he's saying in his statement. Or do you think that doesn't matter?
That doesn't matter. The intention, and for the record, I don't believe that it was a bad intention. I'm not in any way suggesting that I felt sexually assaulted or sexually harassed. I felt invaded. I felt that there was a violation of my personal space.
Violated. Are we back? That was Lucy Flores. All right, thanks for letting me know. So she felt violated is the word she uses. That was Lucy Flores, the 2014 Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor of Nevada, detailing her allegation about Joe Biden's conduct and describing what she says happened at a campaign event attended by Biden 5 years ago. The former vice president responded, saying in part, quote, "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affectionate support and comfort. And not once, never, did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did, I will listen respectfully. But it was never my intention. I may not recall these moments the same way, and I may be surprised at what I hear, but we have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences, and men should pay attention, and I will." We should mention NBC News has not independently verified the specific incident took place, but has reviewed correspondence provided by Flores that appears to corroborate that she discussed the incident and that she alleges around the time she says it occurred. So, but here's the thing, Eddie Glaude, I'll take it to you. She felt violated. I thought Biden's statement was really important because as we descend upon this moment, Me Too, whatever we're going to call it, things are changing. And the way women feel in certain interactions are now being expressed by women, and men are having to edit, change their approach, perhaps even change their entire behavior, which is not a bad thing. Right. We're evolving as a society. But I guess what concerns me about this is the political nature of this announcement, of this behavior, of this violation, so to speak. What's your reaction to her story?
So we have to take seriously any claim, I think, about the invasion of personal space. We saw it, for example, in the debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton when he hovered behind her, and many people felt uncomfortable just by him being there. So
it's just a weird thing to do.
It's a weird thing to do, but I want to take seriously the claim that she felt that her space was invaded. Violation is kind of strong, but I want to take seriously that. I also want to say this, is that we're in a moment, a cultural shift, and the cultural shift means that the lines are blurry. We haven't quite settled on things yet, settled on matters yet. But what has happened is that, as you say, Mika, previous behavior can be thrown into a different light. And so I think of what happens when Jim Crow segregation collapses and people who were raised under particular sets of conditions, under particular ways in which they interacted with folk, call people boy, uncle, aunt. Suddenly those ways of addressing are no longer acceptable. And people who were raised and reared under one set of conditions now have to figure out how to live under a different set of conditions, right? So we're in this moment of a cultural shift that we need to understand that things are going to be blurry. We're going to make mistakes, but it's a good thing that we're moving in, I think, in a positive direction. And then the last point I would make is this. There's the opposition research that's really, I think, insidious in certain ways that we need to be mindful and critical of. But I want to say this too, and I think there's some lazy thinking that happens in our society that relies on labels. Instead of us thinking it in a nuanced way and in a complex way, it's just easier to call someone a racist. It's easier to call someone a misogynist. It's easier to just simply throw out these labels, and those labels will do the thinking for us. And part of what this transition requires, Mika, at least on my view, is that we not fall into the trap of lazy thinking. We have to be careful, deliberate, and nuanced because a lot is at stake.
Yeah, and it seems to me, Adrian Elrod, you know Joe Biden, I'm sure you've met him over the years. There's obviously a lot of different layers going on here. Number one, he was vice president for 8 years. Most people just say, you know, yes, Mr. Vice President, thank you, Mr. Vice President. And, you know, he goes around the country and people are so excited to meet him. I am sure if someone came up to me and did that to me, I would say, what are you doing? Oh, hey, how are you doing? And I would probably say, you're kind of invading my space, but whatever, great to see you, and move on. He doesn't get that real-time pushback. He has been known over the years to be very affectionate, flirtatious even, in kind of a safe way, if I can say. Do you disagree?
No, I actually agree completely with you, and I think, you know, you've done such a good job this morning of sort of striking that nuance there between what's appropriate and what's Joe Biden just, you know, what it's like to just really connect with people versus, as Eddie just mentioned, you know, how to handle these situations where people feel like potentially their personal space was invaded. But here's the bottom line. Joe Biden, one of the things that we love so much about him, those of us who know him and those of us who are just have been so proud that he's served 8 years as our vice president, he has a very unique ability to connect with people. He's charismatic. He is empathetic. And that is a strength. And that's why I think the last few days since this story came out from Lucy Flores, his team has done a very good job of, you know, playing up some of the former female aides who have worked for him over the years, reinforcing, you know, their view of him, which is he is somebody who's always empowered women, who's always, you know, focused on making the women's voices who work for him heard and empowering them as a staff member. So, you know, they've done a very good job of playing that up, but also, you know, again, we are in a cultural shift. So I think his team is acknowledging that, you know, things are moving a little bit.
I think he's acknowledging it. And I'm sure Jill is acknowledging it. But I'll tell you that in many ways, and I want to bring Jerry Mabash into this because he knows Stephanie Carter very well, who wrote the Medium piece. She's seen, you know, across the world now in this picture of Joe Biden squeezing her shoulders, and she would like to make it very clear that was not a Me Too moment at all. And, you know, she felt very strongly about that because she knows what happened in that moment. And this is how things can get blown out of control. But to Adrian's point about his charisma, about his connection with people, you see Joe Biden in the lines during the swearing-ins on Capitol Hill, flirting, if I can use the words, with the mothers often of congressmen and congresswomen who are being sworn in, and kissing them and hugging them. And there you go. I mean, and this is vintage Joe Biden. He loves that connection with people. He loves to make people feel comfortable, to show his warmth, his openness. And in the age of Me Too, Jeremy, that is being very misunderstood, perhaps needs to change. I don't know. But when you listen to Stephanie Carter's story and you read her piece on Medium, you can see how frustrating it is for some people who see Joe Biden as just a kind, generous, gentle man.
Yeah, and those of us who know Stephanie Carter know that she is a professional, brilliant, accomplished, strong-willed person. And I think if anyone were going to call out inappropriate behavior, she would be prepared to do it. And basically what she writes about in that piece is that on the day that her husband, Ash Carter, was announced to be the next Secretary of Defense, she was making her way to the White House. It was kind of a difficult day for her. She slipped on the ice in front of all of the media and the cameras. She wasn't feeling great. She was kind of standing there feeling a little wobbly next to her husband, who was being nominated and announced there at the White House. And Joe Biden did something that she thought was lovely. You know, he put her arms on her shoulders. He said, you know, I've got your back, and I'm going to help you through this event. And she appreciated it. She didn't feel in any way threatened. And yet her image, the photo of that, is being used, and I think, to Joe and your point, Mika, is being misused by those, you know, who want to tear Joe Biden down. I think it's really unfortunate. What's happening is we're defining down Me Too. We're defining it down, and I think if you water it down, it's going to ultimately be a meaningless moment.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jeremy, stay with us, because we're coming to you with our next story, which, wow, what a story it is. So, obviously, everybody that watches this show knows that the leader of Saudi Arabia murdered a Washington Post columnist, chopped him up with a chainsaw, or had that ordered, killed him, buried him. And then the Washington Post did what newspapers do. They actually reported on the story, and they aggressively reported on the story that the Saudi Arabian crown prince actually didn't like what a Washington Post journalist was doing. So they killed him. Then they started attacking Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos' most personal details wind up in a National Enquirer story.
So he owns the
Yeah, Bezos owns the Washington Post, and we know who owns the National Enquirer. And he has links with Saudi Arabia. So anyway, an investigation's been done. And the results pretty shocking. According to this investigation, it seems that the Saudis actually had hacked into Jeff Bezos' phone, because he is an enemy of the state of Saudi Arabia, because he owns a newspaper that's actually telling the truth about the murder of one of their own columnists. We're going to do that next. We're going to go to Jeremy Bash, get his insights and insights of the panel when Morning Joe returns.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.